Welcome everybody to a new episode of Lilja and Lou's podcast. And as you probably remember, last time we took a look at one of the most popular Stephen King movies, Shawshank Redemption. And today we're going to go the other way and take a look at one of the, I won't say worst because that's up to each and every one, but a movie that doesn't get good reviews. And that is The Mangler. We have both seen it and we're going to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. And that shall be a very interesting discussion, I'm sure.
And we're going to have some news for you as well. And we're going to start with those.
Welcome, welcome. Do not fear the door that lies before you. We will protect you. We are your guides, Hans and Lou, and we will give you the latest in Stephen King news. But before we do so, you must prove yourself worthy. You must open the door and join us in the death room.
And the first news is that J.J. Abrams, we know from the TV series Lost and Star Trek, the movies.
And the upcoming Star Wars?
Yeah, exactly. Is in negotiation to do a TV series or TV movies. I think it's a TV series from King's latest book, 11/22/63. And we don't know much about it. He's in negotiation. I don't really know when he's going to have the time to do it because he seems to have a lot to do.
Mm-hmm.
But he's done good stuff, so it could work.
Could. Like you, I'm kind of concerned that how much input he's actually going to have into it because he's spread himself pretty thin these days. He's got a lot of sticks in the fire, but I imagine his involvement in this will be fairly distant, maybe just consulting. I don't think he'll be involved with the day-to-day operations because he's going to be way too busy with Star Wars.
Yeah.
Next up in the news is a update on the movie A Good Marriage, which is one of the short stories from Stephen King's collection, was it Just After Sunset? And Anthony LaPaglia is signed on as the lead male to play the serial killer, so along with Joan Allen. Looks like a very good casting, and I believe they've also signed an actress to play the daughter, which I don't remember our daughter being in the short story. In any event, really looking forward to this. I think this has a potential to be a really great movie.
Yeah, I think so. It was in Full Dark No Stars.
Full Dark No Stars.
Got that wrong? Yeah.
Okay.
I have a good feeling about this. I really, really like the story, and those of you who know me that I like the dark ones.
All right.
Can see why. And I think if they do this right, it could be a great movie. If they can translate those nasty feelings you get when you read the story, I think it can be a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Next up is more Dark Tower movie news. We should say. Earlier last week, we got a report that Netflix was interested in doing The Dark Tower as a movie, and it's really just their chief of the company who says that he is going to talk to Ron Howard when he's done with his episode of Arrested Development, and see if they can get something together. So it's very speculative so far, but Netflix is going for big things, I think. So they could pull it off, I think, financially. So it's still how they are going to manage to do this movie that takes place under such a long time and get it right.
Yeah, this is very interesting. This kind of distribution model might be exactly what the Dark Tower needs, a Netflix model where people are paying for the subscription service. I guess it's just the cost. I know they've done a couple of series like House of Cards and that, but that's a fairly defined 13 episode series, and it takes place in the real world, so it's not super expensive to film. But the scope of the Dark Tower for Netflix, I don't know if they have the appetite for spending that much money on something like this.
Yeah.
Because with a theatrical release, that's a lot of money, extra money that you get paid out here. How much is this going to increase their subscription base? I don't know.
Yeah, I think they would get quite a lot extra subscribers. by
I guess,
marketing
yeah,
the
but that
movie.
must be their hope. But
Yeah.
and we have no details on how we're assuming because they're talking to Ron Howard about it that they want to do a live action version. But yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd be very interested to see how this is if this is going to come to any sort of fruition. Keep our fingers crossed. I
Yeah.
definitely feel that a Dark Tower movie of some sort will happen eventually, but in what form it's going to take, I don't know. But this might be the right platform for it to happen on. So we'll have to keep our ears to the interweebs and see what happens with that.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So in other movie news, continuing movie news, and we've already, this is not unusual for Stephen King properties. The movie news is already being bandied about a project that we haven't even read yet, and that is the upcoming June release of Joyland. And Tate Taylor, who is the director of The Help, is in negotiations and has been granted an option by Stephen King to adapt and direct Joyland. So, and this will be produced with John Norris through his Wyola Films banner. So, not too surprising. It's early stages again. Anything can happen, but anytime a King project can be brought to the screen, that's always good news as far as I'm concerned. I'm really looking forward to this book because I think it's getting overlooked with Dr. Sleep coming out. But early buzz for what I've heard on it, and I think we mentioned in our last podcast, is very positive as well. So I'm looking forward to this story quite a bit, actually.
Yeah. I'm just worried that another book that's going to have the same fate as another book, that The Talisman, that was also sold before it was published, and we all know what happened to that one.
Mm-hmm.
That is absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So, but this one might be easier to adapt. I imagine that it won't have such an difficult themes to turn into a movie. So
yeah, but from what we know of the story, it sounds like it's based in a carnival, which is not terribly difficult and expensive to film because that's been done so often. So, I don't know how much of the story is outside of that because I haven't read it yet, but from a cost point of view, I don't think this one would be terribly expensive. Where The Talisman and Black House would be very expensive. So
yeah. Next up is the next upcoming Stephen King movie project or TV series, and that is Under the Dome. And we have gotten a new official photo from the TV series, and basically shows three men looking up at the sky. It's really not that exciting picture. It's good to see they are moving ahead, and it's not long until we will see this one.
Mm-hmm.
It's just about over a month.
Yeah. And it should be pointed out, if you go to Lily's site to look at the picture, the man on the right in the yellow jacket, that's Dean Norris, who's playing Big Jim Rennie. So I assume that the other people with him are probably other politicians from the town council. But yeah, we're getting sneak peek on the internet clips from the show. They're showing how they're doing certain things and handling the stuff with the dome. So it looks like it's shaping up nicely, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I have high hopes for this one.
Mm-hmm.
One concern that I have, though, is that as far as I know, they haven't decided yet if this is going to be a 13-episode series and then they are done, or if they will carry on after these 13 episodes. And my fear is that they will end up in a similar situation as they did with Golden Years, which they ended with an open ending. And then when it was released for video and DVD, they added in a new ending that frankly wasn't any good at all. So I'm hoping kind of that they are only doing these 13 episodes and getting a good ending to the show, not just an open ending to hopefully doing a second season, and then they don't get a second season and everything will just fall away.
That's going to be interesting to see how they play that out for a couple of reasons. One, because I think for many the ending of the book is probably the weakest part of the book. So how they're going to be addressing where the dome came from in the first place, whether they're going to stick with the extraterrestrial origins or if it's going to be some government thing, we don't know. And that'll be interesting to see how they handle that. And because of that aspect of the story, it will be interesting to see how they are going to play that out over the season. Are they going to answer that question? I kind of doubt it, because that will be the ongoing driver for the story. Or they could surprise us. There's been turns in TV series recently where they answer like the initial problem and then move on to something different. I mean, they could come up with an answer in this, but okay, so now we know where it came from, but how do we get rid of it, or something like that, right?
And I think they have actually said that they won't go with the same ending as the book.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I for one are happy with that, because as you say, I think that's the weakest part of the book, the ending.
Yeah.
I didn't really like that.
Yes, I agree. So in this instance, this is an adaptation that is primed to actually improve upon the source material, at least in terms of the story. How they handle the characters could be a totally different thing, but we'll have to see how that plays out. So, in the last little bit of news, by now, when this podcast is coming out, we're into May, and that means that Joe Hill's Nosferatu has been released, and it's getting very, very, very good reviews. Raves pretty well from all corners, from what I can see. So, and this is a book that you'll probably like better, Hans, because it's more steeped in the horror. So, and I'm looking forward to getting it in the next week or two to start reading it. It's right up there with his dad's output. It's over 700 pages, from my understanding. So that's always good. I love a big book to dive into and lose myself for a while. So I'm really looking forward to this. And from a Stephen King perspective, Joe Hill pretty well embraces the reputation of his father and makes several references to some of Stephen King's writing throughout his book. So those little Easter eggs, I'm not going to spoil them here, but that'll be fun to discover them and to enjoy them as we read the story.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to this one. I like Joe Hill. I enjoyed his earlier books. So
yes, absolutely.
I think this will be a good one.
Yeah, and his Lock and Key comic book series is excellent as well. So
yeah.
So it looks like the torch will be passed on to Joe Hill, at least as far as the King family and horror go, which is great. And that's to take nothing away from Owen King, who's a different type of writer, and I actually really enjoyed Double Feature. I thought it was a very funny book, but yeah, it's not a horror book. It's just a different genre. And we posted a review or a link to an interview between the two brothers and up on your site, Lilja, and I think it's a very excellent interview between the two of them and how they handle being sons of Stephen King as well as what they think of each other's writing. So check that interview out. It's awesome.
They compared how many books Stephen had written when he was in the same age as Joe and Owen, and they were a bit behind, you can say.
Yeah, absolutely. Alrighty, so that's the news for this segment.
This is great. What's our job? We'd like drive around, pick up stiffs or what?
It's time for reviews from the night shift.
Alrighty, folks. So in our last podcast, we talked about arguably one of the best adaptations of Stephen King's source material, the Shawshank Redemption. And if you remember, that's my all-time favorite movie. So after that podcast, Hans came up with a great idea. He says, well, we've done one of his best, so why don't we review one of his worst? So we picked The Mangler. And I have to say I've never watched this movie until Hans brought it up. I didn't even know there was a movie made of it, to be honest. But yeah, this is based on a story out of Night Shift, Stephen King's 1978 short story collection. It first appeared in 1972 in an issue of the Cavalier magazine. And if you've read Stephen King's On Writing, you know that before he made it as an author, one of the jobs he had that he said quite a few times that he hated it was he worked in an industrial laundromat. So obviously that was the inspiration for this story. And Hans, it's a very interesting story to say the least.
Yeah. I must begin with saying that this movie is probably one of the worst I've ever seen. When it comes to Stephen King movies, I think this is the absolute worst movie. Maybe some of the Children of the Corn movies can beat it, but otherwise this is it's so terrible. all the characters are so over the top, and they are overplayed, and the casting is just horrible, and Robert Englund, who I actually like and who I know is a great fellow, but I mean, come on, he's playing someone who's lost both this and that limb to the Mangler, and oh man, it's so bad.
Yeah. Okay. So why don't you set up the story a little bit? What is the Mangler about?
Well, it's a big industrial mangler in a big laundry, and there are mostly women working there. And this Robert Englund character, Bill Gertley, is the boss, and he runs them like they are slaves. They have to work. And one day, one of the girls accidentally hurts her hand and spills blood on the mangler. And as it turns out, when this mangler is possessed by a demon, and when it gets the taste of virgin blood, it goes amok. And it kills people through the mangler. It folds them into small packages, bloody packages. It ends with the mangler running amok and leaving the laundry, and oh man. Then we have this police officer, John Hunton, who's about to investigate this accident in the laundry. And I don't know Ted Levine, who plays the officer in any other movies, but it's...
Oh, I bet you do.
Maybe I do.
Did you ever see Silence of the Lambs?
Yeah, I have.
He's Buffalo Bill.
Okay.
And he also was the police captain in the Monk TV series.
That one I haven't seen.
Oh, okay.
Okay, sorry, but here he's horrible here. He couldn't act if his life depended on it, I feel like.
Well, he is a good actor, but I think it just proves if you don't have the material to work with, even the best actor can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you think about it?
You know, it's a very strange movie. I agree, it's bad, but it's bad in an interesting way, because there's something, I don't know what it is, the look of the movie. I think it's close to one of the worst movies, but I've tried to watch Graveyard Shift, which is kind of in the same setting, but they go under the under the main floor of this workplace as well. But there's all these rats down there. I think that's a terrible movie. Yeah. But this movie kind of shares that same atmosphere, that it's totally grungy. Like, it doesn't matter if they're inside the factory or outside of the factory. At where Ted Levine's his house lives, and I think he's beside his brother-in-law's house, and there's all these weird wind chimes and decorations in the yards, and it doesn't make any sense. But
no.
But the look of the movie, there's something about it that at certain parts of it I found fascinating. The actual machine itself, the Mangler, like, you look at that thing and it looks like a ugly, evil machine. It's got these big gears and chains running through it, and the links are like the size of my forearms. It's just a brutal looking machine. So whoever designed that machine, I think they did a fantastic job. Like, that machine looks scary, but the rest of it, just the story doesn't make any sense. Like, some story, this is just a perfect example of some stories that on paper just will not translate well to another medium, no matter how good you are. And let's not kid ourselves. The two lead actors, Robert Englund and Ted Levine, they've done good work in other projects. And even more surprising is the director of this movie is Tobe Hooper, who he's had a spotty career, to be sure, but he's made some legendary horror movies. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, obviously. I think he did I think a lot of his reputation lies on that movie. He also did the Salem's Lot TV movie, which I really like. He's done some other movies like Poltergeist and Guilty Pleasure minus Life Force. I don't know if you've remember that movie, but it's kind of about space vampires, which is kind of cool. He's done work on the Tales of the Crypt TV series, done stuff on a TV series like Nowhere Man, which I enjoyed, a couple episodes, Dark Skies. And I understand there was production issues that I don't know if he finished out the movie or not, but I think the producer had to take over and actually finish shooting the movie, is my understanding. So
it's strange, so many big names and still such a bad movie.
Yeah, sometimes the money's put down and the tracks start getting laid, and then it's hard to stop a project. But for Ted Levine, I really feel sorry for his character, because I don't think they gave him anything to work with. It was a pretty ridiculous concept. Whereas Robert Englund, at least he had like the makeup and the character paraphernalia, like the his legs were in stilts basically, and he had those canes, and he had like the glasses with one lens blacked out, and he must have had like an over the headpiece or something, because he had the white hair, and his forehead was all wrinkled and whatever, and his one ear looked like it was permanently bleeding all the time. I don't know what it was. So, and he's the bad guy in the movie. So he's just chewing up the scenery and having a ball with it. Whereas poor Ted Levine is trying to carry the structure of the movie on his shoulders, and the structure of the movie doesn't make any sense. So.
There were some scenes though that made me laugh.
Yeah.
And one is where I think it's the beginning of the movie, where some movers are transporting a refrigerator. Yeah. And they are in the way of Ted Levine when he comes driving, and they end up dropping this refrigerator on him. Yeah. And he lies there on the floor, on the ground. Get it off me! Get it off me!
And this fridge, it looked like a fridge from the 1940s, a very heavy metal. With metal legs coming out of. But then it had this thing it looked like a duct pipe. painted white
Yeah,
on top of it,
yeah,
which I've never
yeah.
seen on a fridge. Have you ever seen
No,
a fridge like that?
no, never,
It
never.
made no sense. Like what the heck was and
Yeah, yeah,
somehow the energy of the fridge gets transferred into this machine or I don't know, it re-energizes the machine as part of it.
yeah,
It's kind of like a Frankenstein scene because that like the girl who reminded me of Carrie.
yeah,
She going to be 16 and she's a virgin, so her blood mixed with this electricity or something from the fridge somehow reignites this
yeah,
demon that's possessing the Mangler, which
yeah.
doesn't even make any sense because didn't Robert Englund, hasn't his character throughout the whole movie been keeping this machine alive by sacrificing these young women to it throughout history? Like I
Yeah.
didn't, like it just
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense. No.
No.
And from a horror point of view, you're always, of course, every time anybody's around that machine, you're just waiting for them to get sucked into it. So
Yeah.
it played well in the beginning, but then later on, people would get half into it, and then all of a sudden they miraculously would get out of it, and it just wasn't scary anymore. It just looked like whatever
Yeah.
horror they had built up for it, it was gone. And then it just, every time somebody, like when Ted Levine's character gets stuck, his coat gets pulled into it, it was just laughable. I was just, and he shoots
Yeah.
he shoots himself free by shooting at his coat. I was like, it's just
Yeah,
hilarious.
and this old lady when she gets eaten by the Mangler, and while they're struggling to get her out, and she is under those heavy round things that
The
pushes
rollers
her
or-
down, and
Yeah.
yeah, it was just ridiculous.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
I guess it was probably a cost production issue, but you see people come into the front of the machine, but you would never see what happened through them as they were going through the machine. You'd only see them at the end, and
Yeah.
it was silly. Yeah,
And when
it just didn't hang together at all.
no, and Robert Englund's character, and then yeah, at the ending when he was folded together,
Mhm.
all up to his armpits,
Yeah.
and still he has he
He's
shouts
still
at them.
talking.
Yeah.
And you could tell his head was basically through a hole in the floor or something.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, it was an enjoyable movie, but it was really bad.
As I said, it's bad, but it's bad in an interesting way. Like there's certain elements that I thought really worked from the look of it and that. But you know that one character that was taking the pictures all the time with
Yeah,
a style
yeah.
camera, which is kind of cool because those light bulbs make that big popping sound, right? And then he'd pop them out. But that guy he looked like death too. Like he must have had some sort of mask on as well. In the
Yeah. Yeah.
movie, the character has cancer, right? But you're kind of wondering, like, is this guy possessed or something?
Yeah.
Like what's the deal with him? And the movie doesn't explain the motivations of the characters until
No.
like all of the characters until about 3/4 of the way through the movie. You kind of get the idea that something's terrible's happened to Ted Levine's character, and then you find out that his wife was killed in a car accident that when he was driving, and that's something that they should have probably done much earlier in the movie because you're not really sure why he's such a sad state as he is. And then Robert Englund's character, which I can understand, that bad guy, you want to kind of reveal that slowly over time, but he takes on a girl who at one point you think she's going to get sacrificed in the machine, but then later on he becomes his assistant but
Yeah.
for no reason. Like why would she agree to do these terrible things? Like it didn't make any sense. So
No.
and then
No.
and then the most ridiculous part was when they were doing the exorcism of the machine. Oh, and I thought, oh my God, this is really bad. Poor Ted Levine was trying to, he was yelling at the top of his lungs, but then the machine actually gets up, or part of it gets up, starts chasing them down these corridors, and then they get to this
Yeah.
one part, and there's like a spiral staircase that goes down for like, I don't know, 20 floors. Like I'm going,
Yeah.
where did this come in this industrial laundromat? Like it
Yeah.
didn't make any sense, and
No.
oh, it was terrible. And then at the end, and I believe that this is true to the story actually, because the machine gets away. But at the end, the girl that kind of looks like Carrie, she takes Robert Englund's place for no reason.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
machine, and the machine is back to mangling, and she's got the crutches and the yeah, it just didn't make any sense at all. So
No. And I like it how Robert Englund's character is. He's more annoyed when someone gets eaten by the Mangler that they are stop working. So he
yeah,
bangs his crutches. Come get back to work. Get
I
back to
gotta
work.
schedule the game.
Yeah. And this woman is getting eaten and crushed.
Yeah.
He's worried that they are behind.
But boy, oh boy, when you see something like this,
Yeah.
you just wonder, like, wow, how much money did this cost, and how did you get this made? Because
Yeah,
just
exactly.
so bad. Like, but at least it's bad in an interesting way, not like Children of the Corn or that Graveyard Shift movie. That's a terrible movie, but
Yeah.
there's nothing. There's certain elements of this movie that really had me intrigued, but and then, like after the first 3 or 4 actors, all the rest are like I don't know, nobody actors really. Most of them don't even have dialogue.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's if you're morbidly curious to see this, it almost turns out to be an unintentional black comedy about the Industrial Revolution. Like, so you
Yeah.
could watch it from that perspective, and some of the design aspects are kind of neat, like the machine. It's just an interesting case study to see actors that you've seen do good to great work in other projects, especially Ted Levine, how lost and unsupported they are in a project like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I posted on Facebook asking people to comment on it.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of people didn't even know that it existed, so now you know that. Based on what we have said, you can make your own decisions if you want to see it or not. But there are actually some people here who liked the movie. I guess they saw something that we didn't in this one.
Okay.
But it's fun, and I think you should definitely check it out. It's worth a look.
Mm-hmm. It's one of those so bad that it's good kind of experiences.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And once you have checked out that, you can also check out the 2 sequels.
Hard to believe. I was stunned when I heard that.
Yeah. And the first one is just called the Mangler 2. This one is even more strange, actually, because this one has nothing to do with a Mangler. This time we have a school that it's guarded with cameras everywhere because the safety is the most important thing. And the headmaster is played by Lance Henriksen.
Oh my goodness.
We know from different stuff.
Yeah.
And the Mangler this time is actually a virus that kids in the school upload in this security system, who ends up, I guess you can say, possessing poor Lance Henriksen. And we see him in some kind of computer hall with lots of wires stuck into his body, and he's hung up like in a spider web, and he's controlling everything by computer and killing the kids. And oh my God, it's even worse than the first one. And surprisingly, they did a third movie, and this one actually came out in 2005, so it's not that old. And it's called The Mangler Reborn. We have Weston Blakesley. I haven't looked up where he's been before, but you probably recognize him when you see him. And anyhow, he plays a somewhat demented man who finds pieces of the original Mangler. So this is actually a sequel in the fact that it's based somewhat on the first one. But what happened is that these pieces possesses him to kill people and drag them to his house. And I don't know, he's transformed into this Mangler thing. He gets connected with this Mangler, and there are like pins with knives on him that hacks away at people. And well, you have to see it to understand it. but these three are.
I'll take your word for it.
Second and third movie are just as bad, and if you're only going to see one of them, I think you should see number 3, because that's actually something that carries on from the first movie. There are actually a little connection with the first movie, but I think you will be happier if you stay away from them, actually. So
yeah, both of them they're all rated at like 3 in the 3s out of 10 on IMDb, so that tells you where they are. But I can't speak for the second and third one, and I don't plan to watch them, but there are some interesting aspects of the first movie. But yeah, you really have to be into horror if you want to wade through some pretty strange stuff.
yeah, and I think this. I don't think people thought it was so bad when it was released in '95. I think people had. I don't think they have had such big expectations. So I think they didn't think it was so bad as we think now when it was released. But it's a crappy movie, for definitely.
So there you go. That is our movie review of a bad movie from the Stephen King oeuvre. And after watching Shawshank Redemption, I guess the only good thing is that Shawshank Redemption even climbed higher, in my opinion. And I didn't think that was possible after seeing something like this, but it did. So, so that's our movie review for this podcast.
Yep.
Alrighty, folks, there you go. That is another podcast in a can. I hope you enjoyed our movie review of The Mangler. And in our next podcast, since there's so much Stephen King material coming out this year, we decided it would be good to do a snapshot of what's coming out for the rest of the year, and we'll be covering that in our next podcast. So we'll be creating a King checklist, I guess you could say, for everybody out there to make sure that they are on top of all the Stephen King material that's coming out for the rest of the year. So we hope that you'll enjoy that. And until our next podcast, Hans,
stay safe, but stay scared.